Blacks in technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Welcome, everybody, to the 74th episode of the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast. I'm your host this evening, Greg Greenlee. And if this is your first time listening to the podcast, you can find us at the following URLs. We are at www.blacksintechnology.net. We are also on the Twitters, and that's at Black in Technology, and that's BLKINTECHNOLOGY. We're also on Facebook, and that's facebook.com/Blacks in Technology. And we also have a growing LinkedIn group under Blacks in Technology. So just do a search for Blacks in Technology, and you'll find us. If you are listening in and you're on Twitter right now, if you have questions for our guests, you can tweet them using the hashtag BitTechTalk. That's BITTECHTALK. Blacks in Technology is a tech-focused community and media organization focused on increasing diversity in technology. Blacks in Technology always focuses on forming new partnerships and opportunities to assist our members with their continued professional growth and development. So if you want to partner with us, send us an email to partnerships@blacksintechnology.net. Also, any general inquiries, you can send us an email to info@blacksintechnology.net. And if you want to sponsor one of these fabulous podcasts like the one we're having tonight, send us, an email to sponsorship@blacksintechnology.net. Now, on with some announcements. As I mentioned last week on our podcast, and yes, we're doing a back-to-back week. I don't know how it was scheduled like that, but I don't know. Made a snafu somehow. But it's good that we're doing it back-to-back. You get to hear more of this tech goodness. So Blacks in Technology, we are proud to announce that we are partnered with Self Conference. And we are the official diversity sponsors for that event that's happening in Detroit, Michigan, Motor City Casino on May 29th through the 30th. There are discounts for this conference available via our site, so check out our site and look for the Bit Partners with Self Conference page. You can do a search on the site to find that page. And we're also giving away, we actually have a couple of free passes left to that event. So if you are interested in attending that event, you want to attend for free if you're in the Detroit area during that time, shoot us an email. I think there's actually a link on the form, a link to a form on that page that you can fill out if you are interested in attending that conference. We're also going to be holding a meetup inside of the conference. So check us out there. There's actually an Eventbrite page floating around on our site somewhere. Sign up for that meetup and catch us there. I'll actually be there, and I hope to meet and see some of you all there as well. So Self.Conference is a mix of fantastic tech presentations and insightful soft talks in fabulous downtown Detroit. It's 2 whole days at the end of May, filled with mobile, web, hardware, software, process, and team talks to help you expand your knowledge, meet other technically minded folk, and immerse yourself in Detroit's tech renaissance. So that's happening May 29th and 30th. Also, we're honored to be an outreach partner for the Registry Bay Area 40 Under 40 Tech Diversity Campaign. There are nominations that are being accepted up until tomorrow, May 8th. So if you know someone who you feel is worthy of being nominated for the 40 Under 40, meaning they have to be under 40 years old. That's what that means, people. If they are a leader from an underrepresented community of color under the age of 40 who are standouts in their field of technology, such as engineers, technologists, diversity and inclusion officers, executives, entrepreneurs, or VCs, check that site out. It's theregistrybayarea.com and put in your nomination. Nominees will be evaluated on their professional achievements and influence within their industries. Board affiliations, civic engagements, and other leadership roles will also be taken into consideration. Again, that deadline is Friday, tomorrow, May 8th. So check out the site and submit your nominations. Okay. I think that's it for for our announcements, and now the computer wants to do its occasional, I'm going to freeze and then come back and hopefully, yeah, there it is. Okay. Yeah, that worked. So, anyhow, always technical difficulties somehow, right? We have a wonderful guest here tonight. I actually, I came across a blog of hers, and it was talking about, it wasn't the importance of role models in tech diversity. It was thoughts on diversity in the tech industry from Black computer scientists. And I read that blog, and I was, fascinated with what she was talking about. So I reached out to her, and I said, hey, do you mind coming on and being a guest on the Big Tech Talk podcast? She was more than happy to oblige, and I'm happy to bring on Dr. Nicki Washington, computer scientist out of Durham, North Carolina. So thanks a lot, Nicki.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Believe me, the pleasure is all mine. If you don't mind, we were talking a little bit before the show. Can you give us a little bit about your background, how you first got interested in technology? Just give us a background about where you're from, where you're at right now, because I know you're in a transition of moving, and tell us how you got interested in tech.
Okay. As you said, I was born and raised in Durham, North Carolina, which is home to the Research Triangle Park area. And my mother actually was a math major and is a retired computer programmer from IBM. So I had a lot of exposure and experience early on to technology at a very early age. And from there, I attended Johnson C. Smith University in Charlotte, North Carolina, majoring in computer science, and graduated in 2000. And from there, attended North Carolina State to do my master's and PhD in computer science, and relocated to the D.C. area in 2005, working with the Aerospace Corporation, which is a federally funded research and development center doing research in the area of software engineering. And at that time, after about a year, an opportunity opened up at Howard University for a faculty position. And so for the last 9 years, I have been a professor at Howard in the Department of Computer Science. And as you said, I am currently transitioning. So in the fall, I will be a new professor at Winthrop University in their Department of Computer Science.
Wow, very exciting. Congrats once again on the position. Wow, you have a pretty amazing background. You graduated from NC State with a PhD in computer science, becoming the first African American woman to do so. So what things led you to pursue your PhD in computer science, and how are you utilizing that amazing accomplishment to get others into computer science?
So that's a really good question, and everybody always thinks there's some profound answer. And the truth, Greg, is that my senior year of college, I wasn't ready to work. And that was the first motivating factor. I knew what I did not want to do, which was strictly program, but I didn't really know what my passion was and what I was interested in. And so I planned to pursue a master's degree in computer science, but that was about it. And around the fall of my senior year, the president of Smith at the time, Dr. Dorothy Calzianci, told me that there was a fellowship that she was nominating me for, which was the David and Lucille Packard Fellowship. And that was a 5-year fellowship program for graduates of HBCUs to pursue their PhD in science and engineering. And so I honestly had no idea that I wanted to pursue a PhD. I told her, well, I'm not really sure if that's what I want to do. And she just kept telling me, just apply. Worst case scenario is that you get the fellowship and you have to turn it down. And so I applied, and over the next few months, I also was invited to the Focus program, and it was Focus 99 that year at Georgia Tech. And that program was designed to bring in African-American and Hispanic students and expose them to engineering graduate programs at Georgia Tech and the opportunities available. And one of the things that really stood out to me in the banquet, the opening night, was the percentage of Black PhDs that were in computer science. And it was so low and dismal that I kept thinking, wow, if I could be in that number, that would be something that's really cool. And that was probably the first flicker of interest that I had in pursuing a PhD. And so once the academic year continued to progress and it got closer to graduation, I realized I did receive the fellowship. I applied to PhD programs and I was accepted. So it seemed like all of my steps were being ordered along the way, even though I didn't really know that was what I wanted to do at the time.
Excellent, excellent. You kind of had that, you kind of, what you just described is kind of a moment that I kind of had when I first came up with the idea of Blacks in Technology. And it was kind of that thing that drove me was, you know, that lack of presence of people of color in the tech industry. And it was, you know, and mine was, and I've told the story a billion times, it was, you know, attending a tech conference and enjoying the atmosphere so much that I wanted others to actually participate and be able to experience what I was experiencing at the time, but then just noticing the lack of representation there and just wondering, like, wow, you know, what can I do to change this dynamic? And it sounds like that's kind of, you know, in a roundabout way, kind of, you know, the same thing that you kind of had. You've seen that dynamic of not having a representation of PhDs and comp sci, and that motivated you to do something about it. And that's kind of how, you know, what led you to want to pursue your PhD in computer science. I think that's amazing.
Thank you. Absolutely. And even as a graduate student, I felt it was important to make sure that other students coming behind me saw students who looked like them doing those things
right.
that they could also do.
Right. And that's just so important. It's one of the main tenets of Blacks in Technology is that visibility aspect, that, you know, I see someone that looks like me, it's possible now. And, you know, no matter how many times I repeat that, it's a recurring thing. When I talk to other people that's in the same industry, and they see this and they say, hey, you know, this is something that I want to be an example. I want to, for other people behind me or coming up behind me or who are pursuing this same type of endeavor, to see that there's people that have made it and that are pursuing the same things.
Absolutely.
So what would you say was one of your biggest obstacles that you had to overcome during your comp sci curriculum? Not even just the PhD. I'm referring more to just the core curriculum of computer science. You're just getting in, and now all of a sudden you get hit with something and you're just like, oh, wow, how am I going to overcome this?
So is that more classroom-wise? Honestly, Greg, I don't know if there was a lot that I felt like I couldn't overcome. I think there was probably one class, computer architecture, and I think that's just everybody's Achilles heel in computer science, and some people call it computer architecture. I think that at the graduate level probably was my obstacle. But I think outside of the classroom, my biggest obstacle was trying to get professors and even some of my classmates to not stereotype me or drop me into this bucket of what they thought I was based on how I looked and who I was and what school I came from in terms of undergraduate institutions. That was probably a way bigger obstacle than anything I could have ever done in the classroom. And I think it was just because I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead and finish.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's because, one, they just had no experience dealing with people of color, particularly African Americans and African American women. And sometimes I think there's that stereotype of what they thought you could or could not do. And I face that a lot, particularly with classmates.
So what was that experience like for you? I mean, were some of the professors, were they receptive? Did you get pushback from some of the professors or even the students? Was it a thing of where students kind of were more dismissive of how you felt about how they perceived you? What was that like?
So when dealing with professors, for the most part, I did not have too many issues. I was a very proactive student. I made sure that if I had questions, the professors knew my name. I was at office hours, etc. But there was one particular faculty member I remember that I was interested in working with because he was in my area with network. And when I sat down with him, he was an Asian American professor, and I remember him telling me that he'd never heard of Dr. Nickis University, even though it was only 2.5 hours down 85, and that he just didn't think that even though I graduated valedictorian, that I could cut the work with him. And he blatantly just told me that in a very arrogant fashion. And I respectfully said, okay, thank you, but I made it my mission from that point on to prove him wrong. So everything I did from that point, which was my second semester at NC State, was to prove him wrong. My advisor was an absolutely phenomenal man, Harry Peros, and he had never worked with an African-American graduate student. And so we were both learning from each other. And he was very receptive to everything in terms of life, Black culture. I mean, he just wanted to soak everything up. And so he presented a very different perspective for me in terms of faculty. When it came to students, it was interesting because sometimes when we had group work, there were issues because, of course, I'm one of the only African Americans and definitely the only African American female. So if I'm in a group where there's no one else that looks like me, then a lot of times my contributions to the group would be questioned or challenged, regardless of whether they worked or not, and regardless of whether a classmate could get his answer to work correctly or not. It didn't matter. There was one instance, a classmate from Clemson was very, very critical of everything that I presented in terms of my program to solve a problem. Even though his would not work and mine compiled and ran and executed fine, even our other group members just finally had to say, seriously, this is getting ridiculous. And at a certain point, I just decided that I would rather work alone than have to deal with the constant back and forth and confrontation.
Wow. So, it's funny that you mentioned some of these experiences that you had, because when you read some of these blog posts, right, and they talk about diversity in tech, one of the main things that I see on these blog posts as far as comments is that as long as you're good enough, that's all that matters, right? And even though there's people out there that would say something to the contrary, like, hey, sometimes it doesn't matter how good you are. People are still going to question you because of skin color, because of gender, or whatever. And so I guess what I'm saying is I like to hear this perspective because, it lets you know that these things aren't just made up, that people aren't just saying this just to throw out the, so-called race card or whatever that is, but that these experiences are real and that people need to actually acknowledge this in order to help fix this issue as far as tech and diversity. So sorry that you had to go through that, but I'm glad that you were vigilant and that you made it out the way you did. So excellent.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think a lot of times we kind of look at it as par for the course, which is unfortunate because it shouldn't be.
Right.
But at the same time, we have to be doubly prepared for those kinds of things and make sure that the students coming behind us are equally prepared, if not more. I mean, the spotlight is on diversity now, but the question comes in almost the same, I think, as when the affirmative action push came through of, well, you're just getting hired because there's a big push for diversity right now. So we have to make sure that our students are aware that even though there's a push for them, that they have to be prepared for those same types of hurdles and obstacles and side comments that may come their way as well, no matter how good they are.
Right. So do you think it's a good thing to how can I put this? Because I've had discussions with people as far as, when it comes to, let's say, for instance, like racism, right? And people saying, oh, something is racist, or those people are racist. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, do you think that could be a deterrent to some, right? Like somebody wants to go on comp side, they start hearing horror stories of, what they're going to be up against, what, some of the odds are, what, some of the experiences that they might face. Could that be a detriment to some, as opposed to, a good preparation tool? Or how would you kind of, how do you go about preparing the next person for that experience?
Well, that's a good question. And I think depending on the person, it can be either or. It can be a great motivational tool for someone who has a very strong personality, a very thick skin, and is ready to hit the ground running to prove any and everybody wrong. But at the same time, if you have somebody who has yet to kind of find that sense of security in themselves, it may be a very quick deterrent. If they're shy, they're not really ready to handle confrontation, especially when you look at 18 to 22-year-olds. They're still trying to figure themselves out in general. And then you add on, what do I want to do career-wise? And so if it's something that they feel like is just too much confrontation or headache, then that can definitely drive students away. But I think that we have to find a way to make students aware that these challenges are a part of life. Unfortunately, when there are few of us in a field, it's just, like I said before, par for the course. But that's your chance to be the change agent. And if you stay the course, then you reap the rewards, which are great. But it's about preparing yourself for things in general outside of this technology. One of the great things my PhD advisor would tell me was that doing a PhD in computer science is not about the research. It's not about the work even. It's about understanding yourself and understanding how you work, how you deal with failure, how you deal with rejection. And those were some of the best pieces of advice that he ever gave me, because it taught me to deal with a lot of things outside of just getting the grade and getting the job. Because then you enter into scenarios where I'm right back in a job where I'm the only Black female with a PhD in this company, where most of the people who work there are retired generals or PhDs in engineering, but there's not another female, and there's definitely not another Black person with a PhD. So how do you deal with these retired military personnel who think, who's this young little 20-something-year-old who thinks that she knows everything coming in here? It's that same kind of armor that we just have to prepare students in either case. And I think regardless of the personality of a student or a person, it can be learned, because we all didn't start out like that. We've all had those bumps. We've all had our feelings hurt. We've all gone home crying at some point because somebody said something. But the difference is that we stayed the course and that we brushed ourselves off, and then we learned from it so that the next time whoever says something just didn't hurt our feelings as much, to the point that now we're kind of ready for it before it even comes.
Got you. Excellent, excellent. Now, this is kind of shifting gears a little bit, and this is more along the educational aspect of computer science. And I've had discussions on Blacks in Technology Forum a few times, and this deals with, computer science and technology in general not being taught in correct manner. And after going through, the computer science curriculum, getting your PhD in computer science, if you could change one thing about computer science and how it's taught, what would that be?
Question. The one thing I would change is that it has to relate to its audience, and I don't think that the current curriculum does that. And what I mean is this. There was a quote from Bill Gates probably about 9 or 10 years ago at an education summit, and he was actually talking about the state of public education, saying that training today's workforce is with the tools and technology, or the public schools of yesterday, is not going to work. It's like teaching students using or how to use computers on mainframes from 50 years ago. It's the same kind of context of computer science. We're trying to teach students a curriculum that was developed decades ago that doesn't speak to them, doesn't speak to what they know, what they understand, what they're interested in, and we're expecting them to thrive in that environment, and it just doesn't work. If we look traditionally at what kinds of students have entered computer science, then we know that that curriculum only works for certain types of students. They're typically stronger in science and math by the time they graduate from high school, but that's not every student. They typically look a certain way, but that's not every student. So if we're really going to increase the numbers in computer science, specifically in terms of African Americans, then we have to be able to reach students where they are and take them to where they need to be. And that means that not every student is going to be ready for calculus by the time they get to the 12th grade. However, that does not mean that they can't learn basic computing fundamentals, algorithmic thinking, logic, programming, whatever else. So I think we have to be able to find culturally responsive pedagogy that we can use to reach students and not just throw things like code and syntax at students and expect them to understand automatically what all this means and get that algorithmic thinking is supposed to be equivalent to math, especially when students may be struggling in math. So that's not a great analogy for them. If you tell me it's similar to math and I'm not doing well in math and hate it, then why should I like computer science?
Right. I had a friend of mine tell me that we should get into teaching logic at a high school, not even a high school level, earlier than that, an elementary level. He was actually saying that I don't know if he said it used to be taught or it's taught in maybe another country at a very early age. But he said that if you really want people to start understanding computers and programming and code, we need to be taught logic at an earlier age.
Absolutely. But I think one of the things that I see as a major problem as well is that there's too much emphasis on coding and not enough on, like I said, that computational thinking and that logic, because computer science is not just programming. That's the foundation, but there's so much more to it. And if we can get students to understand that and equate it to what they're doing every day, then it makes all the more sense. And I have to give a shout out to some amazing people who I know are doing work in that area because, again, cultural relevance is so critical to making sure that students are getting what they need in terms of pedagogy. But it's not just about what relates to Black students, Hispanic students, and so on. It's just what students are doing in their everyday lives that they can then infuse computer science with. We did a middle school curriculum at the Howard University Middle School of Math and Science for a full academic year. And we taught everything from computational thinking to binary numbers down to mobile app development. And one of the things that we did to get students thinking about loops and constructs like that was in the context of making music and sampling songs. And a gentleman, David James from Syracuse University, who's completing his PhD, did an excellent presentation to students on how to create loops and algorithms by recreating the sample to Jay-Z and Kanye West Otis song. And the students ate it up.
Oh, wow.
And everything made sense to them in terms of algorithmic thinking in that context. We also did things like teach us the steps to your favorite dance. And then it became clear that, well, you can't miss a step and you can't assume that I know what you're talking about, just like you can't assume what a computer knows, because it's only going to do what you're told. So if you tell me turn to the left, but you don't tell me 90 degrees versus 180, then I'm just going to keep going. And so students started to make a lot more sense with things like that. And even because students in Washington, D.C. use the metro to get around, we taught networking in that context where the data was moving through like the trains on the different links, which were the tracks. And then each of the different stops became maybe a switch or a router if you were able to transfer to a different line. And by doing that, students started to think about how networks were working every single day that they got on the train. And every single time they went home, they were able to explain something to someone they knew in their family or in their neighborhood about what they learned and how computer science was already a part of their everyday lives.
Wow, that's excellent. That's excellent. And that kind of something that you just mentioned that kind of leads us into this next question. You had a blog post, and this is how I came across you online. And the name of the blog post was "Thoughts on Diversity in the Tech Industry from a Black Computer Scientist." And you talk about a little bit of skepticism about some of these tech orgs and some of the individuals who run them, and that they are now just getting into the fight, right? Discuss why you're skeptical, and then if you could talk about ways in which these individuals can kind of prove themselves, because you talk a little bit about them proving themselves.
Right. So my skepticism, was born from a few things, and I think it was attending so many different workshops and meetings and seeing so many different programs being developed that talked about increasing diversity. But when you look at everyone at the table, nobody looks like the students they were trying to affect. And even more so, there was no inclusion within that group of individuals who, like I said, have been doing this since basically birth. If you're a Black in computer science, then this wasn't something that you just decided to do 3 or 4 years ago. This was pretty much something that sparked your interest somewhere in your childhood, and you pushed through to adulthood. But in the meantime, while you were busy climbing, you were still turning around and lifting as well. So this isn't anything new to us in terms of reaching back and exposure, but it just seems like all of those individuals of color who could be those great role models, who could provide that value added to programs that really help students get into computer science, because we know what it takes. We know what the options are. We lived it. We ate it. We understand it no better. Or better than none. So the issue that I had was, how can we talk about inclusion when the programs that I'm looking at aren't really inclusive in terms of who's running them to get these students into computer science? And so that's where my skepticism came. And my suggestions on how to change that are simply work with those individuals who are doing it, who have been doing it. There's so many of us in computer science who, again, we've made this a mission. And I speak to, there's people in academia who this has been what our passion has been from day one. But we have so many hurdles because a lot of times we're going through the tenure process and we're told, oh, don't worry about that. That's outreach. Outreach doesn't count for tenure. So then you're stagnated in that sense because this is your passion. But at the same time, people are telling you in order to keep your job, you have to do something else. Wait till you get tenure. But then you're on the industry side and you're busy fighting all of these obstacles as well. And then when you have this great idea of, why don't we start this mentoring program, or why don't we start this nonprofit arm? That's great, but nobody's really interested in that. Well, fast forward 4 or 5 years later, someone else has this light bulb moment, and then it's a brand new idea. So it just seems like all of that hard work and those efforts that all of those people of color have been working on individually or collaboratively have been kind of tossed to the wayside because we don't have the means and the exposure of some of these programs that have large names and backing. And so I think it's critical that if you really, really want to be serious, then you prove that by not only pumping money, because money's great. And I think we're seeing, a lot of companies right now push hundreds of millions of dollars towards this diversity problem. But pushing money to the problem is not going to solve the problem. What's going to solve the problem is bringing people to the table who have the expertise. And the expertise is in those individuals who have already been through this same process themselves. Because we can't expect those individuals who don't look like these kids and have never had experience working with individuals of color, and really, for lack of a better way of putting it, have never really wanted to provide that much access from history now being the most suited for this diversity solution.
Wow. Yeah. Right now, you're being too real for TV. So I'm glad I'm glad you're on this podcast instead, because I've had some of those same feelings about what's going on in the tech industry when it comes to diversity. And I actually had a panel probably a few years ago at South by Southwest discussing ways on how we can take the people of color who are, the comp sci people, the engineers, and push them to the forefront, right? Let them be celebrities or whatever, however you want to phrase that. But push them to the forefront. Let them be our champions instead, And I see a lot of people who, and not that other people can't champion the cause. I'm not trying to say that. I'm saying that it seems like, at least to me, that these people are kind of left out of the conversation, and we're not pushing them to be our champions. It's always somebody, even celebrities, right? Actual celebrities are being pushed to the forefront, like they're actually spearheading diversity and technology. And I'm just looking like, why are we pushing our celebrities, our actual entertainers, to the forefront of this when we should be grabbing, the engineers, the tech professionals, whoever, and pushing them, letting them be the face, so that students can actually, because then if say for instance, and this is not to call anybody out like Hammer or anybody like that, but say you push Hammer to the forefront of this, right? And not that he can't be a champion, but what is that saying to that you have to be Hammer in order to be a part of this, right? That you have to first achieve, entertainment success before you can actually, to me, that's the wrong message. To me, it's, push the people who are working in this industry, who is doing the work every day, who's been doing the work since way back when. Let them be our champions. Let them be our voices.
Right. I agree. And, not to step on any toes, but I also said the same thing when it came to a lot of the push from Jesse Jackson. And I felt like it's great because we're getting, we're holding people to the fire, but at the same time, why aren't we having people like Mark Dean coming to speak at these conferences on tech diversity, or Mark Hanna, or the individuals who are really, really, really in the forefront, the Juan Gilbert? Why is Jesse Jackson doing conferences on tech diversity? Now, if you have a background in technology, that's great. But if you don't, then, like you said, let's get the individuals who live it, eat it, and breathe it so that they can speak the lingo and get people involved and let these kids see that, hey, I'm doing some great work, too. And by the way, that computer you use, I own 7 or 8 patents on it. And that CGI technology that you like in Toy Story, yeah, I created that. Those are the kinds of things that those kids can then look at and say, wow, I can do that too then.
Exactly. Wow. We could go on and on about that. Because I've been saying that for years now. So it's happy. It's good to hear, that same thing being said again. In that same blog post, you say, and I'm going to read an excerpt from that. You say the following: "What happened to all of the Blacks and Hispanic computer scientists out there? Are our struggles, voices, and efforts now irrelevant because we don't have the notoriety of Steve Jobs, Zuck, or Larry and Sergey? Aren't each of us the best representations of how not to only survive but thrive in a field where the odds are against us from the start?" Well, and we were just talking about that. Where are the board members, consultants, and senior level execs that have the first-hand experience to help students succeed? What about the trailblazers like my mother, godfather, and others who spent their entire 30-plus year careers at organizations and intentionally served as recruiters to help diversify companies like IBM from the 1980s to the early 2000s? So while I'm absolutely 110% all for diversity in CS, I'd be more optimistic if the spotlight was actually on the folks who've made this a lifetime mission instead of those doing it for the moment because the spotlight's on. So let me ask, how can we begin to push these people to the forefront? What do we need to do? Do we need to pull Jesse Jackson to the side and say, hey, like, look, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but look, these are the people that you need to be bringing along with you, or these are the people you need to be pushing in front of you to speak for us?
I think it's a combination of things. So I think we have to have organizations like Blacks in Technology, these big tech talks and things that are getting people out there that are exposing the country and the world to Black computer scientists, Black technologists, and engineers. But I think also we have to find a way to start holding these organizations and individuals who are at the forefront accountable. How to do that is still a question I'm not sure if I have the answer to. But I think it's got to be a grassroots effort collectively. I think collectively, if we start as Blacks in technology and Black engineers, getting proactive at events like whatever this conference was, letting people know that, hey, this is great, but can we please push to have this person? I'd really like to see him. I really like to see her. Getting, social media has been a great tool we've seen in starting movements. And I think that's something that we have to do and leverage in this day and age if we're really going to change the dynamic and the face of diversity, for lack of a better way to put it. And when I say the face of diversity, I mean the people who are the change agents. Because right now, I'm not really sure if the change agents look like the pool they're trying to diversify.
Gotcha. Great. And I want to talk about another one of your blogs, and this is very, very interesting to me when I read this. This is in your blog entitled "The Importance of Role Models in Tech Diversity." There's a line that reads, I first realized I was the exception, not the rule, around the age of 19. And I thought that was very powerful, but it has what I consider kind of a twist to it. So can you explain to our listeners who haven't read the blog what exactly you meant by that line?
Yeah. So, like I said, I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, which is home to the Research Triangle Park area. And my mother, godmother, godfather were all math majors. Two of them were engineers. One was a math teacher. My father was a retired K-12 administrator. And a lot of the people I grew up with, particularly Black students my age in my neighborhood, at my church, were all children of engineers and scientists as well. And not only engineers and scientists, but those who graduated from HBCUs, North Carolina Central, A&T, Winston-Salem State, Shaw, St. Aug. So I had this incredible community of individuals who looked like me and were feeding me with information, even when I didn't realize they were. They were role models beyond what I could have ever imagined. So to me, I took it for granted growing up that I had so much exposure to science and technology through Black men and women in my life, because they weren't just individuals that I saw once a year at a workshop. They were individuals that I saw at least once or twice a week at church or at a track meet or basketball game or at school. And that was powerful, but I didn't realize it at the time until I got to college. And like I said, I attended Johnson Smith University, which is an HBCU. And in my classes, though, not one single professor in my department was African American. And it hit me. It was odd because I attended an HBCU intentionally. I only applied to HBCUs. And so I took for granted that once I got to the university, while I had African American professors within my department, I just assumed that would be commonplace, and it wasn't. And that's when it first hit me that, wow, what I just live every day at home is totally outside of the norm. And I don't know how many young Black men and women would have that experience that I had growing up. And as I've worked at Howard over the last 9 years, and some of the students I interact with, realized that that still is the exception, unfortunately, and it's just something that needs to change. It's one of the reasons that I chose to work in an HBCU, because of that exact reason, that I never had an African-American faculty member, and I definitely never had an African-American female. Now, I didn't need one because I had so many female role models, such as my mother and my godmother, but at the same time, I know that the average Black female coming into computer science can't say their mother was a computer programmer for IBM and their godmother is a high school math teacher. So they don't have that exposure. They weren't pushed at an early age like I was. And I literally grew up with technology in my home from the time I can remember talking and walking until now. Every couple of years, we got a new computer, and my mother tasked me with, you put it together. You put it together, put all the software on there, and just let me know if you need any help. And I was excited because that was my little project. But I didn't realize at the time what she was doing was letting me tinker and play and build. And that's what excited me about technology from an early age. And so when I got to high school and started programming, then it just clicked. And I liked the fact that I could create something and I could click a button, and now I can see this creation come to life. Wow.
So I'm gonna reiterate something that you said early on in your response, and that's community. People always, they say, what is Blacks in Technology, and I always stress the community portion of that, and it was purposely done, since the inception of Blacks in Technology, is that I wanted this community, I wanted this place, this safe haven where, not only, people of color can come and who are in technology can come and talk about technology and thrive, but a place where we can, share and transfer knowledge and information amongst each other and help the next person become one of us, so to speak. And I got that just from going to these tech conferences, seeing the communities that evolve from these tech conferences, and just wanting to apply that principle to something like Blacks in Technology, and wanting to bring that collective to the Black community. So I think it's very important, extremely important. I think what you said about community, and it's funny in a ways too, because normally you hear this same type of scenario not from a person of color at all, and definitely not from a woman, right? You'll hear this, when you talk about somebody like Steve Wozniak, and his dad was an engineer, or you'll hear it from, some other engineer that happens to be a white male, that they came from where both of their parents were, academics, and they were engineers, and so I think that's a great thing that's that was the dynamic that you were in, that was the environment that you were in, and that's what really nurtured your interest in technology. I wish it could be like that for everybody, but it's not, and that's why there's a platform and there's a community like Blacks in Technology for people to come to and engage in. So that's excellent. So having role models and mentors who look like you, share similar experiences as you, is always a much talked about topic. So why do you think that's so important? What's so important? What's the psychology do you think that's behind that?
Well, I think it's simply put that you have to see it in order to be able to be it. And if I can't see myself doing it, then how can I ever really understand that it's accomplished? I even liken it to the NBA, since we got the playoffs going on. When you look at kids now, and a lot of these kids who are getting drafted, you ask them, who did you model your game after? Who's your inspiration? Now, of course, they'll tell you their mom, their dad, their family. But when they talk about their career, they'll tell you Kobe, Shaq, Jordan, all of these other greats who look like them and played the game at the highest level. And they don't talk about the math teacher pushing them to be a great basketball player. They're talking about those basketball players that look like them. And so in that same respect, we have to be able to place role models in front of these kids who look like them and are achieving at the highest levels in technology to say, look, you can do this too. If I made it, you can as well. And just like anything else, be it sports, whatever, how you train, how you practice is how you play. And that's critical. And we've got to get kids understanding that. Now, not only do we have to get kids understanding that, we've got to get all of the blacks in technology to understand that. Because I think a lot of times we have to make sure people remember that, you know, you can't be the Latrell Sprewell where I don't want to be a role model. You are. You are because you're one of the few. And regardless, people are always looking at you. And so if someone's always watching, then you've got to make sure that you're setting an example that you want someone else to model. And in this day and age, and like we said before, with this push for diversity, it's critical that every person of color who has any experience in technology is doing something to bring somebody else along with them. Because if each one of us pulls at least one person along, then the game will start to change. Because not only are you bringing somebody else along, but you're teaching them the importance of role models and mentoring and building and lifting while climbing. And so it becomes a trickle-down effect of we're pushing and we're building, and that community starts to get much, much larger.
Right. I totally agree. Even though I know I've ran into people who are not wanting to be in that position, right? There are also people who will turn away, like purposely shun that title. They don't want to speak, you know, for all black people. They don't want to speak and be that person, even though in an indirect way they really are. You know, I've ran into those type of people, and I think it's what you said. I mean, I think it's imperative that we take up that mantle. I always tell people that, you know, blacks in technology exists so we don't have to exist, right?
Right.
And what I mean by that is, you know, 5 years, 10 years, however long it takes to achieve this, you know, more equality, more of a level playing field. But I really don't want to have to do this 5 years from now. I want there to be this level playing field to where we're bringing up enough people behind us to equal out this playing field, to where there's enough people in comp sci to where if I put, you know, an Asian American male, a white male, and a black female right in front of you, you could not pick, or you wouldn't even assume who is the computer scientist out of those three.
Exactly. I agree. And none of us got to where we are today on our own. And that's why it's even more important. So, you know, those individuals who think it's not my responsibility, it is, because as much as you think that you did it yourself, you really did not.
Amen to that. So what advice would you give to young people of color who may be interested in pursuing comp sci in college? Because, you know, one of the things that comes up is that coming out of high school, young people of color aren't ready for that level of coursework, or they haven't been exposed early on to be able to tackle that type of coursework. What advice would you give to people?
I would say tinker around, play, get as active as possible, and all it takes is simple internet access, be it a desktop, laptop, or mobile phone. Get online, start playing, start looking at how to think critically, start looking at how to develop code as well. You can build mobile apps using App Inventor. You can go to Scratch or BYOB and learn basic programming using drag and drop environments. Then you can build from there to start learning more Java or C++ or anything else that you're interested in, Python, Ruby on Rails, whatever. attend any type of event in your local area at any institution, community college, four-year university, nonprofits that are designed to expose students to computer science. Understand and start to look up what computer science actually is, because a lot of that information you can find online. Go to Khan Academy, those resources that are online. Leverage YouTube and these things that you're already using to learn. Just have that thirst for knowledge. And one of the things that I really, really, really stress to students, particularly students of color, especially once you get to college, if you're currently a computer science major or anything in engineering, write. Develop your writing skills, because if you can be a strong tech person and a strong writer, then the game totally changes.
Wow, excellent advice. And speaking of some of these online resources, I want to talk to you a little bit about, and just pose a question here. There's a lot of online education platforms out here. So coming from a brick and mortar institution and with all these online educational platforms out there, where do you see the future of computer science as a curriculum, given all of these like dev boot camps, these free online courses by, like Stanford, MIT? I'm actually taking one right now through Coursera, where I guess the professor is from Michigan University. So where do you see the future of comp sci in a brick and mortar institution? Do you see that still going on, still thriving? Do you think, there's eventually just going to be the shift to where most stuff is just going to be online?
Well, I think there's going to be a shift with more blended environments. Where you have flipped classrooms, where there's a lot of viewing of videos and information online and more discussion and interaction in class. But I think that brick and mortar universities will still continue to be critical for CS curriculum. There is a lot of online education right now. However, I strongly believe in the power of being in front of somebody and, like you said, seeing other people like you in that same situation, having peers working with you alongside, solving problems, working collaboratively. Those are things that you just cannot do with a fully online environment. And for that reason, I think computer science will have to continue to be at a brick and mortar type of institution. You can get some of the benefits of online education, but you can't do it completely there. And if you look at it, college isn't just about getting the education and the credits. There's that entire development of being able to interact with others, work collaboratively, deal with conflict, and all of these things are learned at a traditional university, be it a 2-year or 4-year. So I think it's going to be critical to still have that face time, that interaction. And as much as we try to remove that with technology, it's still totally vital when it comes to the learning process. Because a lot of times we're still dealing with students who have different learning styles, and everybody's not going to be able to just deal with sitting in front of a computer, listening to online videos, and taking tests. Some people need that interaction. And especially we're looking at students of color. Like we said, I can't know who my role models are if I never see them. And so we got to be able to build those communities, not only that peer group, but also those mentors and other individuals that they would see as the professors in the classroom as well.
Excellent. And before we get out of here, what's next for you? What do you have planned for the future?
Oh, good question. I want to, I'm transitioning, like I said, in terms of my career. And I'm looking at, in terms of research, how to leverage cultural relevance to inspire, engage, and motivate students of color, particularly African-American students. And that's a big push for me. And I think not only on the student side, but also on the workforce side, how do we begin to train companies and organizations to understand the importance of cultural relevance, why it's necessary, and what they need to do to be more sensitive to it in terms of working with diverse environments. And like I said, I think it's great that we have these organizations doing these things, but I think and contributing money, but I also think it's important that they understand that with that contribution comes the expectation of accountability. And it's not just, here's a check, now problem solved. Let's make sure that we're doing things to sustain this effort for a lifetime. So that's probably my passion moving forward. I want to continue blogging because I'm so horrible in terms of getting thoughts down on paper as much as I should be. So I really want to focus back on that. So those are probably the next steps in the future for me.
Got you. Well, I definitely want to extend an invitation to be a contributor on the Blacks in Technology site. I'm pretty sure your expertise will be much valued there. If you ever want to be a volunteer contributor, we have some amazing folks who contribute their writings to us, and you're more than welcome to contribute there. And anything else Blacks in Technology can do to help you, just let us know, and we'll definitely be more than happy to oblige.
Thank you, and same here, Greg. Anytime, please let me know what I can do. I have enjoyed it.
Excellent. And before we get out of here, how can people get in contact with you, follow you? Give us your, if you're on Twitter or wherever, how can people stay in touch with you?
Sure, I'm on Twitter, Dr. Dr.Nickiw. So that's Dr.Nicki W. I'm on Facebook under Prep for Success, what every parent should know. You can also reach me at Nicki, Nicki, at Prep for Success, PREPPED, success.com. And also the blog you can find on the website as well, prepforsuccess.com.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot, Dr. Nicki Washington. I really appreciate you taking your time out and joining us and providing us with some incredible advice and some incredible insights, and giving us your story and your amazing journey. So we wish you much success in the future, and feel free to, in the future, come back and join us for another episode.
I accept. Thank you, Greg. I had a great time.
No problem. Thank you. Take care.
Yeah.
Well, that's it, everybody, for this episode of the Blacks in Technology Bit Tech Talk podcast. We want to thank all our listeners. Thanks to our guests, Dr. Nicki Washington. If you like what you heard tonight and you want to let us know, if you have suggestions or comments about the show, email them to us at contactus@blacksintechnology.net. Join us in 2 weeks from now for another exciting episode of the Bit Tech Talk podcast. We are going to have Tiffany Ashley Bell, and she is going to talk about her organization. She was on an earlier podcast. It was like one of our first podcasts. You might remember her from the New Me Accelerator and from the CNN show, Black America. And we're going to have her back on because she is part of an incredible organization that's doing some fantastic things. It's called the Detroit Water Project. So May 21st, same bit time, same bit channel. So join us then, and remember, tech yourself before you wreck yourself. Take care and have a good night.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology.